particular episode, From Cognitive Search to Insights, we're really happy to welcome back Dr. Moritz Müller. Moritz heads the Squirro office in Singapore and is responsible for the APAC market. As the former head of product, he still works closely with the product management team here at Squirro. And I think really here to be able to seal the fundament, what should we as listeners understand from the terms search, enterprise search, and cognitive search? And maybe as a follow-up to that thread, why are we focusing on cognitive search today?
That's a good question. And I always also try to clarify these terms before we start, for instance, discussions with our clients to explore use cases around the topic of search. For me, we typically structure this all under the term cognitive search nowadays. It was Gartner that framed the term cognitive search. You will also see there are cognitive search solutions out there. And under the term cognitive search fall all the respective solutions. It can start with basic search solutions. So these could be, for instance, website search solutions, where you have website content that you want to make searchable. Then this can be in an enterprise context, enterprise search solutions, where you try to provide search on top of different data silos. And it can go into the direction of knowledge management, where you want to guarantee that all the knowledge that is available within an organization, for instance, is accessible, can be found. These can be, for instance, PDF documents, can be Office documents, PPTX, Word, and so on and so forth. I think we are all familiar with the struggle of accessing and finding helpful information, so that all falls into that category of cognitive search. Top level part is cognitive search. Below that, we have respective solutions from website search, enterprise search, knowledge management solutions, and so on and so forth.
Okay. I mean, you've mentioned there, and it's one thing that I've myself taken from that definition. And it's maybe from the respect of me looking at maybe a problem that cognitive search is addressing in itself. You mentioned that there is this struggle of accessing information. And maybe I've understood this from the need for quick information that's certainly been heightened by the emergence of a lot of sophisticated search engines, and maybe users demand more information in shorter periods of times and they can't access the information. Is that the problem that cognitive search is addressing, or what exactly is cognitive search addressing as a pain point in an organization?
I think fundamentally it is the solution on how to access information. Let's say you need to find something about a specific customer of yours. You need to find some information about regulations. You need to find information about the product, or you just want to understand what is the research that has been done on a specific topic. So from that point of view, it is clearly the solution to find information. But when we talk about finding information, then cognitive search, and that is the reason why Gartner has introduced the term cognitive, so the cognition of the concepts of what you search for. Nowadays, it's extremely important to understand not only the keywords that you search for, but to have technologies that allow you to get contextual information. And that is, for me, the main differentiator of the cognitive search solutions that are around nowadays, that they really try, and they are successful in doing so, in surfacing more relevant information that with a single keyword search and hit, you would not find otherwise.
Okay. Can you go into expanding on those technologies? I mean, from what I'm understanding, it's more of an aim to maybe enable contextual and semantic search, or am I missing? I mean, can you highlight the technologies?
Absolutely. I will try to keep it a bit on a high level, because we could talk probably first for hours about the respective technologies for this. So let's focus on some key concepts. It is obvious that machine learning and natural language processing are key technologies that are nowadays used. Overall, you have also heard about semantic search. We at Squirro are at the moment investing a lot in providing semantic search capabilities. We work with our clients to try to provide a lot of this out of the box, because in the past, too much time has been spent on customizing this. There will still be some customization done, but we try to push more and more into the product. And out of the box, you find synonyms, for instance. Synonym matching can be done with different approaches. You can have a predefined list, of course, when you say, I have a synonym list where I know that my product is internally addressed with different terms. Ideally, of course, for the more generic terms, you want to guarantee that you have models that can understand them. A good example for this is our current unfortunate pandemic situation. If you search for coronavirus, you also want to receive or get search results back that do not mention the word corona, but actually the word COVID or COVID-19. So those things are easily available out of the box, and they can quickly be delivered with out-of-the-box models, but also quickly customized if this is needed to a specific product context also. That is just the context of synonyms. I think it also goes into a relevance component nowadays. You do not only want to get results where there is a keyword match. You also want to have some relevance sorting in terms of get results where the terms is mentioned more often, where it's mentioned potentially already in a title. All of those things are nowadays handled as part of a so-called search ranking, that the results that are ideally more relevant to you are showing up before results that are not that relevant.
And is this addressing another issue in itself? Why is this important to the end user? And can you give me maybe an outline of a typical end user that this would be of importance to?
Absolutely. So I think all of us are very familiar and used to using Google. I think Google is a completely different setup. Google has access to much more information, but we are familiar with having search results presented to us in a specific way. We try to imitate parts of those things with our solution, but in an enterprise context, meaning that we source the respective search results out of the enterprise data that is available to us. So there we need to account for this. And a typical user would, for instance, go in and search for a client. Then you want to automatically address all the data that is being related to that client. And that could, for instance, be that you have an internal proposal document, which is not necessarily containing the client name, but it is stored in a folder that relates to that client. Because not all the data and information that we have necessarily contain client or product names. They might be stored in a product folder. What we can do with cognitive search is we inherit that information from, for instance, the storage location, and then we enrich it. So it's tagged with this information, and the moment you search for client A, you automatically also get the respective proposal documents or other related documents that do not immediately contain the client name, but you at least find all this information.
Excellent, yeah. So how would I go about enabling that in my own organization?
That's a good question. Typically, we want to work very closely with existing IT departments. The companies that we work with are normally having a certain size of employees. So we have internal IT that helps us. Of course, we enable this also as a SaaS solution that you can, for instance, quickly connect. With Squirro, you can connect relatively easily a Dropbox folder, a Google Drive folder, but you will find that more in smaller organizations. There it's extremely easy to set this up, and then we can provide a respective server. You have a service agreement that handles respective data safety. That can be done for smaller organizations. For the mid-sized companies to the bigger ones, we work extremely closely with the IT departments to understand what is the data infrastructure they already have. is there, for instance, a data lake? Is there already an effort to combine all the respective data lakes or the respective data silos into an internal data lake where you can pre-enrich the data with an existing taxonomy? We try to leverage these internal efforts and then sit on top of this respective data lake to provide the search experience. And the steps that are needed to be done to enrich the data and the information, they can either happen with our solution, or we use the pre-enriched data that is part of the system. So it is very important that companies are thinking about this. We support this. We help them to understand what is needed in terms of data readiness, what is the system of record, and what is the respective taxonomy that should be used. And as part of this discussion, it is not only key to include IT, but we want to make sure that as early as possible, we can include the final end users. So in that sense, the business, to guarantee that we make sure when we enrich the data, we speak the same language as they do. Let's say if they have a certain taxonomy that they use for their products, we want to guarantee that we use this the moment we load the data, because you can imagine very much that the moment you speak the same language and you have the same terms, you make the solution much more usable and much more user-friendly for the users. And that is exactly what you want to achieve.
Mm-hmm. And is this easy to do? Or have you had any complications or challenges that come with speaking the same language?
So, of course, we are facing certain challenges like any IT project. I mean, I'm not talking about change management within an organization. What we have seen is that a lot of the users that we involve in the early project phases, test users, for instance, they have a very clear idea of how they want to improve their search experience internally. They tell us immediately, look, all the products that I have, for instance, for this specific category, I want to have a quick link button to this. I want to be able to filter down immediately with this product category. And this is how we learn. This is how we make our search much more user-friendly. We try to integrate it in existing solutions. And by existing solutions, I mean, it can be a CRM system where you have all your client information anyways if you search it. It can be even a SharePoint page. If you have information stored on SharePoint, you can, with a few clicks, integrate with the information from SharePoint. And then you integrate again your cognitive search solution into your SharePoint page, for instance. This is very easy to do. And having users on board that give you early feedback allows you to deliver a much more successful product. In terms of taxonomy, I think it is also important that we educate our clients that this is something that they should maintain together with the business. It's not necessarily helpful if we come in externally and we tell them, look, this is the taxonomy that you want to use. My experience clearly shows that companies, of course, have common terms that they use, but every business unit has their own taxonomy and classification of clients, products, topics they discuss. And it is very helpful for us that we can accommodate for these custom client-specific taxonomies in our product.
And what do you mean specifically by they should maintain it with the business?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. So what I mean with that is it is always work to maintain a taxonomy, but it's always very helpful when you search for information. And I think it starts with the fact that when we store information, I think even so nowadays we have a search bar where you just can type in information, and cognitive search can do this. Cognitive search, for instance, when you have type add functionalities, will try to auto-suggest certain terms that you search for. That's extremely helpful. Mm-hmm. But if you want to, for instance, tag information, and by tagging information, you help also the machine to understand how data is related. Then you can very much look at this like you store all the client information in a specific folder. That's the same way, the same kind of discipline that is needed to do this. Instead of just throwing everything on our desktop, for instance, you throw it in a specific client folder, because then you know all the client information is going to be in that folder. The same happens with the taxonomy. You should make sure that you have an agreed taxonomy, because otherwise your users, someone calls it, gives it this name to a client, the other one gives this name to a client. We have had client projects where there were internally 3 different spellings used for client names. Someone added the private limited in the end, someone did not. And you can imagine in a search bar, when you search for company, let's say Apple, and you search for Apple, and we suggest, for instance, 3 tags like Apple, Apple Inc., Apple Corp, or Apple Private Limited. That can be super confusing for a user. So when I speak about maintaining this, I mean that there should be a common understanding of a taxonomy, so that you keep that lean. You can always expand it, you can always adapt it, but it is in the interest of the users and also of the business to have someone who owns this and who looks after it.
And who would that person normally be?
These can be different persons. I think it is important that this comes from the business. We are not normally in a position that we decide this. We try to advise on this. My experience shows me that sometimes business looks at IT to maintain this, but I don't think it is good practice to have a developer defining which are the categories that a business is using. So ideally, this is a function that is in between. And because this is a function that is in between, it is important that we make the management of this as easy as possible. And in the long term, and I don't want to go into detail now because then we will be sidetracked, all of this kind of taxonomy discussion will be part of the so-called knowledge graphs that you will be seeing popping up left and right going forward. Whenever Google answers, for instance, a question inside of their search, they use this kind of graph database that they have behind, so where they understand the relationship. This is one of the things that nowadays we have part of our solution as well. So there is more and more of this is automated, but it's still important that someone looks over this and guarantees that this is in line with what the business is doing.